So I'm Andrew Skousen. Pleased to see so many friendly faces and people that I recognize and that are kind. It's nice to meet a group that's not going to heckle me too hard. So most of you know about my background. My dad is Joel Skousen. My great uncle is Cleon Skousen. My dad writes the World Affairs Brief, a weekly newsletter, and about 5 years ago, well, going on 6 now, he started to add a section to the bottom of it. So my dad's World Affairs Brief newsletter, he started it back right before Y2K, around the year 2000. He'd actually written it for a stint before that, but he restarted it at that point, and he started to talk about his view of world events. My dad is a unique personality. He's a self-made person, and he has this unique ability to look at the world critically without being a cynic about it. And it's this unique balance where he is very careful to look at the world, and anything that doesn't pass the smell test with him, he digs in deeper. One of the biggest things that started his whole foray into the geopolitical area, he's always been in politics. He had written a pamphlet about the fundamentals of liberty, and this was picked up, and he was actually asked by, what's his name, Phillips of the Taxpayer Party, to come out to Washington and be in Washington as head of the Conservative National Committee. And so when I was four years old, he trucked us all off, and we lived in Virginia for a while, in Alexandria, and he would go off each day to Washington, and he rubbed shoulders with people like Newt Gingrich, and was very put off by him and how he wasn't willing to take principled stances, which we all now know, of course, was exactly the color of his coat most of the time that he's been in Washington. And my dad, though, noticed, especially when certain things came to pass that we all wanted to see as true, but that didn't ring true to him. So when Russia started to break apart, and he started to look at these events, he started to look at them critically, even though all of us were thrilled that the Iron Curtain was finally coming down, and that the Berlin Wall was breaking apart, and that people were getting out of East Germany finally, right? I mean, everybody was thrilled about this. My dad stepped back and said, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. He said, and we could go into this in depth, this wasn't the purpose of the presentation tonight, but he noted that some of the key events about it didn't ring true. For instance, when now I'm gonna forget the names, but Gorbachev himself was an enigma in that in the way that communist hierarchies work is that the strongest, toughest dog fights and claws its way to the top, usually by eliminating all of the other foes around it. And this has been historically true. Stalin was ruthless. He even had he had Lenin killed, right, to maintain his grip on power. He was ruthless with the entire country. What followed afterwards was the same thing, until Gorbachev came along. Now, they had started to sort of put on a soft face in Russia before that time, but Gorbachev was just a low-levels arms dealer before he was vaulted up to the premiership. My dad started to look into other details about it, the collapse of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev, of course, produced basically the fall, or produced the excuse for the fall of the Soviet Union by bringing about glasnost and perestroika, which was to revamp their approach to the economy and to allow more freedoms, and this supposedly started to fracture the whole system, because it wasn't pure communism anymore. In fact, if you study all communist systems, you will recognize that there are always uprisings that are always fomenting at every level. And all that you have to do to allow them to grow is just not to stamp down hard on them. On his deathbed, the leader of Romania actually revealed that he had been told by the communist leadership to allow the protests in Leipzig to go forward and not to squash them. So you start to get all these uprisings that aren't pushed down, and he started to watch all of this. But when what's his name stood on top of the tank in Red Square and gave the big speech, who became president afterwards. Boris Yeltsin, thank you. When Boris Yeltsin stood up and had the famous speech that was broadcast all throughout Russia and sort of galvanized this idea that it's falling apart. My dad said, "Wait a second, those are state-owned TV cameras that are still rolling here. Like, why wouldn't they cut the feed, right? I mean, we all know that doesn't happen unless it's set up that way." The head of the KGB, the GRU, the Defense Department, they all fled for their lives. Turns out they had been replaced just a couple of years earlier with other people. The people that my dad then looked at that looked like they were actually manipulating the controls behind the scenes in Russia all got massive loans from the state bank and bought up all of the key entities in Russia. They got all of the energy, they got the oil, the telecommunications. They bought them up using state funds, and they became the oligarchs, which of course forever afterwards was considered the most powerful people in Russia because they still were the most powerful people in Russia. And people like Boris Berezovsky continued to run Russia even when he was out in Spain, wasn't he? Anyway, after that sort of fell apart, my dad got back into the production of his newsletter, and he started to explain to people his worldviews. And he has distinguished himself as being one of the most unique people to be able to pick apart world events by looking at things more closely than everyone else has. This has become extremely important in our current events with Russia attacking Ukraine. Decades ago, my dad predicted that Russia would in fact try to reconsolidate all of their satellite states together before they became, after they had become strong enough. He noticed that and his views, by the way, were echoed. There's a famous book out there by a Russian defector called The Perestroika Deception, and it's called, his name is, will come to me in a second, but he basically said the same thing, that they are planning this to foist this onto the West. The West will then rush in with aid and help to help this crumbling nation. And that's exactly what happened. The United States actually went in and rebuilt the oil and gas infrastructure that drove most of the economy, but there was great amounts of aid and trade that flowed after Russia, collapsed. And China, the Chinese population was watching, of course, what was going on, and their population was hoping to get the same thing to happen there. Just as an example of what you will see happen when a communist regime does not allow things to go forward, just look at what happened in Tiananmen Square. So that was, massive revolt. There was hundreds of thousands of people that crowded the square, packed it, and the tanks rolled in. And that shows what the real strength of the communist nation has to bring to bear. So, my dad's current point is, and the reason for our advocating that people get prepared, is because Russia is still strong. Russia still has the same mindset as we were used to during the Cold War period, during when we were preparing to push back against a communist threat on the United States. And they have not wasted the years and the money that flowed in with aid and trade, so that they are now a very strong, formidable superpower with the best and most numerous nuclear weapons of any country on earth. They have far surpassed the United States, even though we, for a long time, were considered that we had technically a superior number of nuclear weapons. Most of those were tactical nuclear weapons. Most of those were bombs, artillery shells. We used to have the MX missiles, which were the missiles that had 10 warheads on top. It was considered the best deterrent, nuclear deterrent weapon in our arsenal, and that was dismantled.
Who did that?
I can't remember who did that. I think it might have been, I don't know, I better not say. I don't know for sure. My dad would know. He's very good at having these facts right on hand. But they were dismantled. The Minuteman missiles are still there, but we take them out of their silos. So they were built in the 1960s. We built 450 of these missiles. We installed them in missile silos all over. Some of them are in Nebraska, but most of them are around Malmstrom Air Force Base in North Dakota and Montana. The idea with those is that they space the silos out, and the silos are hardened on top, so that an incoming missile from Russia would actually have to score a direct hit on each missile to incapacitate that missile. When a nuclear weapon hits something directly like that, it throws up a huge amount of debris. And the idea was that they sort of clustered them together so that they were just far enough apart that one nuclear explosion could not take out multiple of them. But they were close enough that all of the debris would actually act as a debris cloud, so that other incoming warheads flying through the debris would get ripped apart by all of the leftover debris, and so they would have to wait and stagger the hits on these. But the meantime, they could retaliate by launching them out through the clouds, because they're traveling much slower as they take off into the atmosphere. So it was a brilliant move, and you will see on maps, for instance, when we produced strategic relocation and pointed out all of the strategic targets in the United States, there's these huge swaths of all these targets over by these areas, and that's because they all are all individual targets. So what we expect to have happen, I guess this is all part of my background, but also leading up to the idea about what we are preparing for. Yes, Van?
Dismantling MERS was Obama in 2010.
Yeah. It seemed like the MX had been dismantled before.
The
that.
MX was dismantled
But I
from
think-
2003
but they
to
took-
2005.
Thank you. But they did take off. I think there used to be 3 warheads on the Minuteman missiles, and they dismantled those down to 1. And they still take those missiles out and they fire them off from the California Air Base once or twice a year, just to prove that the technology works, and they always work flawlessly. It's crazy how well things were built back in the Cold War era. It was just really robust type technology. Anyway, we now live in a world where Russia is increasingly belligerent. They know how strong they are. Putin, by the way, is a strong man. We saw that as soon as he changed the constitution so that he could remain in power. It was very obvious that we're back to the strong man is the one who's the face in front of the crowd. We saw that with Xi Jinping. These are both the Stalins and Hitlers of our day. We still expect that Russia and China are finishing the touches to their military buildup, and that they they will launch out to try to take over large swaths of the world. But there's one problem, and that is the United States is still in their way. We still have carrier groups out there. We still have big military presence. They will want to decapitate the American military. And so my dad's view on the world is that Russia and China will combine forces and strike the United States someday with, first of all, an EMP strike, which will take down our electrical grid, followed very soon thereafter by a rain of nuclear weapons that will pinpoint strategic military targets. We don't expect them to target, at least in that first volley. Looking at history, wars tend to sort of start honorably and then work their way downward, right? So at least the initial volley will be strictly military targets, many of which are in some of the California cities, so some cities will get hit. So we expect that there will be a loss of power for all of us and fallout that will hit us. And that, it's hard to tell when that's going to happen. We expect that Russia will finish consolidating their satellite states, the hardest of which to take down, which is the most antagonistic toward Russia, is Ukraine. And we are experiencing right now Ukraine getting slowly ground to dust, and it's very sad to see that. And the longer that Ukraine holds out, the more time we have to prepare. Unfortunately, as much as I like what Trump was doing on foreign policy, he's hurting our timeline here. He's been playing into Russia's favor. Russia did a great job of selling themselves as being on the side of conservatives for a long time. They spent millions over here advocating their point of view, and they are on the other side of the globalists that are working against us too. And so Putin and Russia can often position themselves as saying, hey, we're on your side too. And of course it's false. He's ultimately not our friend.
We have no shortage of enemies, domestic and foreign.
Domestic and foreign.
Yeah.
Now that's always the way it's been. And we feel blessed that we live in a free country and in a time of great prosperity and freedom. The idea, though, is not to sit on our laurels and enjoy this time, but to use the time to become better and stronger ourselves. One of the difficult things that's going to happen then, that we all need to prepare ourselves personally for, is for a kind of collapse of society that will come when the power goes out and there's fallout that comes overhead. That is going to produce massive mayhem and social unrest around us. It's going to severely tax, if not bring down, the typical infrastructure that we rely on with police, fire, and medical care. Most of those people aren't prepared and don't have shelters themselves to protect themselves, and they will be busy taking care of their own personal security needs and won't be around to be able, even if we did have a way of contacting them, to be able to come to our aid. So as things start to shut down on our very high functioning trucking industry and our supply lines, we are going to see everything break down very, very quickly, which means that store shelves will empty, and that's probably the biggest thing that we all have to deal with. If you don't have store shelves, how are you going to eat after a certain amount of time? We are so used to having decades of being able to walk into the store and get light bulbs, batteries, new shoes, whatever kind of food we want at any time of the year practically. These things will suddenly stop, and Americans will be flying high with the wings taken out from under them, and it will suddenly become very, very difficult. Most of us will survive. The idea that 90% of people will die, we don't think is going to happen. Looking historically back, even with invading armies that would ravish the countryside, kill crops and animals, most of the people still found a way to survive. Now, they were hungry and they were gaunt, but you could cobble together enough to stay alive most of the time. The fallout is going to be most deadly right around the detonation sites, but then it drifts into big clouds and disperses, and it immediately starts to degrade, and in about 2 weeks it's down to not as dangerous levels. Now, I expect there's going to be multiple waves. You all want to have a shelter. You all want to have it. We have books about the cheapest ways to put together shelters, preferably in a basement. Those books are listed in the handout by the door. There's the high security shelter, and there is the secure home, and we've also listed the website for the World Affairs Brief on the handout. So tonight, though, I wanted to take the next step. In December, I gave a presentation about passive home defenses. So ideas to strengthen your own property lines. We talked about fences around the outside perimeter of the property, or at least set back from the huge setbacks we have. And then we talked about fortifying the outside of your house, putting in steel bars. Those are great options on top of this, and steel security doors in front of your front and back doors. We talked about hardened locks, I think. We talked about also the options of even creating, even inside the perimeter of your house, you can also create safe spaces. You can create safe rooms. You can create hidden spots. You can create aspects of your house that aren't obvious to an intruder. So an intruder who breaks in doesn't know that there's more rooms down inside the basement, or a closet here where it's not obvious. You can do a lot now to make it harder to give you more retreat levels. Today, Jane asked me to add a follow-up about the active aspect of home defense. So at each layer of your passive defenses that just sort of push back on intrusion, you have an element of active. And as anyone knows, a good defense is a good offense, right? And this is basically the other half of that. How do we get a good offense? Well, I was going to step through it in basically the same level. So you can start at the property perimeter. The idea is that you get a warning as soon as someone starts to approach and defeat the outside perimeter fence. The ideal in this case is actually a good dog. A good dog is immensely valuable in multiple situations. Ideally, though, the dog will not be one to give off false alarms, not bark all the time, but will bark when someone actually starts to come and climb the fence. Someone who doesn't look right, who doesn't smell right. The dogs can often alert you to a threat before the threat even gets to your fence, because they recognize who normally comes around, and dogs have kind of a sense of good and bad people. So a good dog, but the good part usually involves training. You can't just go out and buy a better dog or a worse dog. It means that you have to put in the time to get a good dog. Watch for the opportunity for a dog. Be careful not to push away a dog that might come into your life. Look for the chance that it might be something that's right for you, that maybe the Lord's giving you as something that's going to be a help to you later. You can get fence alarms. You can actually get cables that will run along the inside of the fence, and when they have vibration, it changes the conductivity in it slightly, and sensors can tell if someone is climbing your fence. And so those, I've got a link on the handout to those.
Do those survive EMPs?
No, probably not. You would have to be prepared probably with a backup sensor box. So EMP is like a radio wave, but it's very powerful, and so any long metal tends to act as an antenna and pick up the electromagnetic pulse stronger. So any sensor that is attached to a long wire will be more susceptible to an EMP attack. I expect that wristwatches, even cell phones and small radios and small devices that aren't plugged in at the time the EMP strikes will most likely survive in most areas of the United States. We can get into the EMP if you have more questions about it.
There's
Okay.
the little shotgun shell, things that,
Yes,
that you put an empty or not
Yeah.
empty one, no shot in it, but the.
right, as a trip sensor, right?
Yeah, trip sensor type
Sure.
thing, is that, you recommend those as well?
Yeah, I think that could be.
They'll survive an EMP.
They will
right?
certainly survive an EMP, yes. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of options like that. We have the trouble. Okay, so what we deal with is often we are trying to get alerted to someone who breaks a certain perimeter barrier that we have as our security perimeter. And one option that is often used by military personnel when they set up camp is instead of having a sentry at every point, is they will pull a long, very thin wire out, and then you can hook it up to a small little device that will let go of a trigger that then hits a pin and sets off a blank that looks very much like the cartridge on a shotgun shell. And it sets off a big bang and preferably wakes up the defenders in time to alert them to it. And you can buy these devices, or their web pages online that teach you how to build them. They're
You can get them on
typically
Amazon
very
too,
small.
yeah.
You can just buy them on Amazon.
Yeah.
So like I said, the time and prosperity is fabulous in a lot of ways. Yes,
These kind of situations where a deer could activate it,
yes, certainly.
animals, large enough
False
to-
alarms is a
Yeah.
big problem,
Oh dear.
and all of us have to watch out for the false alarms. A couple of years ago, after we had moved to Spring City, there was a couple of kids that would go around Spring City around 2, 3, 4 a.m. and they would just pick up whatever was left lying around, which was surprisingly common. And it was surprisingly hard for the chief of police here in this small town to stop them. And for several months, the chief of police had asked people to just, if they were ever up at night, to just look outside, which is kind of silly, really, if you think about it, because all that did was raise the heightened tensions and fear of people that there was somebody who might be lurking outside in the dead of night, right? But it revealed to me that just how open we are as society. Anybody can walk onto anybody's property in town fairly easily. You might have to jump a small fence. None of us like to live in like the rest of the world does. You go to Mexico, you go to South America, they all have 8-foot tall concrete walls with wrought iron gates, and that's just for petty crime.
And broken glass on the top of
Broken
the wall.
Glass, yeah, set into the mortar, very cheap, very effective, very visually deterrent. I'm not gonna climb that. Those kinds of things, we're all going to wish we had someday. Now, I recognize that we as Americans don't want to build a property that looks like a compound right now, right? And the neighbor's laughing at us all the time, but you want to try to prepare a mindset for that, and to think ahead about how you might easily convert something that looks natural or normal into something that has a little bit more edge, so that someone who comes to try to attack your place goes, I'm gonna move on to the next house, right? You don't have to run faster than the bear, you just have to run faster than the next guy, right? Sorry, bad jokes. But the point is that if you can make yourself a harder target, you will attract less of those kinds of attacks. Now, we fully expect that when people are starving, the people who haven't prepared, the people who are naturally mollified by the prosperity that is around us will revert to crime, and we will see a massive surge of crime. Even here in Spring City, there are There's a bell-shaped curve of people and the population, and there's always that chunk of people, and it kind of gets pushed up the curve by how severe the crisis gets. And people will be ransacking houses, especially among people who are known as preparedness people. They will be targeting log cabins in the woods that are typically stockpiled with some kind of food and supplies. They will be systematically picking through things to try to get what they can. And your house will eventually rise to the top of the list. As soon as they've cleaned everyone else out, you will become a target. Now, we can band together as a community, and that's what happened with these people. You know, Jane was organizing Citizen Watch, and we went out patrolling the streets and looking for these people. There's some stories about that.
Did you find them?
Well, okay, so we didn't find them, but I did learn some things going out on watch. Number one, when you're patrolling, driving up and down the streets in a car, you can't see or hear anything.
And any smart thief, if there's a car coming by, it's
I
gonna
will
hide.
just,
Who are we kidding?
dip over to
Ride a bike.
So,
Yes.
one cold winter day, I got on my bike, and I was scared to be out on a bike all by myself, so I got my dad to go out with me, and he got in a car, and he drove east and west on every street, and I rode my bike north and south on every street, because then I don't have to huff it up the hills and back, because east and west is a lot steeper than north and south, right? So I'm riding my bike, and it's cold and chilly, and there's kind of a drizzly rain, but you know, I had this time slot that I was supposed to be out there for, so you know, I was out there, and I'll tell you what, I noticed some suspicious guys that were out there. Two sort of adult, not adults, just probably young adults, and they seemed to be dressed in dark clothing, and they were sort of, you know, walking along the street. But I thought that was very suspicious because it was quite cold, and it was, like I said, rainy. And that was, you know, one of the first leads that we got about these suspicious characters. Anyway, I don't think anything came of it, but they finally moved on, and we regained a perhaps false sense of peace around the town. But I haven't forgotten the lessons of that and how fragile our security really is that we all sit and enjoy. People leave the cars in the ignition sometimes here in Spring City. It's just kind of crazy. You go to California, and you see quickly just how easily it is for gangs to, you know, work the system, and they will. So we all have to learn how to be on guard. The passive defenses are good. The perimeter fence alarms can help wake you up long before people start attacking the perimeter of the house. Yes, go ahead.
Just back to the last topic briefly, what were the nature of the crimes being committed by the young hoodlums?
Well, you know, people aren't very good at security. I actually didn't lock my cars, and I came out one day and noticed that a camera was gone. And so I felt bad about that because, you know, if you leave dirt or food around and you suddenly get an infestation of mice, you can really only blame yourself for enticing them with food, right? And I felt bad that I had something that was valuable enough for them to take and get something from, right?
They were mostly things like that, people left their cars
Little
open.
break-ins and
And
things.
guns were taken, didn't even break in, I don't know if they broke into anything. They
No
just walked in.
vandalism or broken windows in the
No.
town, nothing like that, just stealing.
Right,
Not
just
I mean, that's serious.
stealing, right, just walking off with anything that wasn't nailed down or locked up. And we had gotten complacent in the town, or we weren't locking things down. You go to, you know, California or Detroit or places like that, and people lock their cars all the time because this problem is easy to have. And, you know, where was it where I had a brother-in-law who visited someplace like Detroit, Chicago perhaps, and just stopped at the stoplight. People would walk along with the shopping cart, just open the car doors and just brazenly take step and keep walking. You know, you're in your car, what are you gonna do? You know, there's no police, you're not like gonna run and tackle the guy. And they know that, so they just, you know, walk past cars, and if your doors aren't locked, they'll just heist whatever they want. Yes.
When,
Speak a little louder.
a mission that our first mission in Jamaica, I was in
Oh, yes.
a branch presidency in a branch that was in Spanish Town, which is one of the most dangerous towns in the world at the time.
Wow.
And we were at church in our nice church building, and someone came in and says basically the local gang is out in the parking lot breaking into cars. And I was the second counselor, and I said, well, I'll go out there and close the gate, we can trap them in there. And the branch president just grabbed me and says, no, you will not do that. And if you do that, they'll come in here and they'll start killing us. And I said, well, can we call the police? That won't work. The police cannot handle this. And so we just had to let it happen and just stay in the building while they did that. And I was just, I couldn't believe that's how bad the situation can get if you just let it get that way. You know, it's been that way in Jamaica for a long time, and in Spanish Town, probably one of the worst places for it. But it can get really bad if you let it.
Yeah. That's good to know.
And another easy thing to take is, someone was telling me that their friend survived Katrina. She was a member of the church, she was single, and she holed up in her apartment, and she said that she looked out the window and there were thugs going down the street, breaking into cars, but they were mostly taking the gas. They were siphoning all the gas out of every car down the street. And so then she couldn't get to the church where they were handing out supplies at one point later on for church members. So I thought, wow, that's something, I didn't think about, we've got maybe a vehicle outside that's locked, but it'd be easy to jimmy to get into the gas tank, and then where would you be if you needed to get somewhere without fuel?
Yeah, good point. Yes.
I have two brothers that still live just outside of Seattle, and they have had to put hidden kill switches on all their vehicles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, otherwise when they go to work, the vehicle will be gone. So, yeah. Seattle. Oh, I've got lots of stories, ask me later.
Yeah.
I'm picturing World War II
Yes.
in Europe. Every time a major city was hit by a terrible air raid that resulted in thousands of people fleeing, getting away from the fires, getting away from the damage. They come with almost nothing.
Yes.
They are disoriented. In many cases, they're also injured.
Yeah.
They're not criminals,
Right.
but they have to survive something. They have to have something to eat. They have to have some place to live.
Right.
And they will go, first of all, begging.
Mm-hmm.
Would you take my family in? And we don't have any clothes other than what we have on our backs.
Yeah.
We're not bringing any food with us. We don't have any time to
Yes.
get money or other resources, things like that. Innocent people. But eventually, if they don't get what they need, they become desperate and they could do criminal things. That's what I'm picturing here. If there's
Yeah.
a nuclear attack on Provo, thousands of people in Utah County will head out to wherever they think they can get help
Mm-hmm. That's right.
innocently.
That's right.
So I'm not thinking just of criminals looking to take my valuables, but people who, for no reason, for no fault of their own, are desperate for food, water, shelter.
That's right. There will be many difficult situations, and with all of our preparations, we can't think through all of the nasty situations that will present themselves to us. But by having more options with our preparations, we can at least choose who we decide to help and who decides that we're going to help them no matter what.
We may have that choice.
We may have that
We may
choice.
not.
At least we have a few more options given to us in our favor. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking we talk a lot about vehicles and transportation. But really early on, that'll cease, because we won't have gasoline. I mean, unless you store
Unless it's
tons of gasoline on your
That's
property, which is problematic.
It is problematic.
The vehicles are gonna be useless or used for something else.
Yeah.
Where are you
My,
gonna go?
my suggestion,
Roadblocks.
my suggestion is that we all get bikes,
Yes,
that we all have bikes, even if we don't ride bikes, we have bikes available and whatever tools and, you know, tubes and whatever to
Right.
keep those bikes running.
Yeah.
Because not only are they quiet, but they're effective. The Japanese had whole divisions of men on bicycles, and they couldn't even follow them because there was no noise, there was no, you know, the point being, if you had a bicycle with a basket or two on it, you can get to and from in a very short time.
yeah,
And even you can raise a militia in a very short time. So I really would advise everyone to have some bicycles that they hang in their garage or whatever, because that's the kind of transportation. Horses, they're problematic also, you know. Other forms of transportation are far worse than bicycles. So if we all purchase a bicycle or two and have it on hand, even
Yeah.
if we're too old to ride them, we'll have children or,
I completely agree. And bicycles are an excellent fallback choice. The key, of course, is to make sure that they are one of the more practical kinds of bicycles. A lot of American bicycles aren't that practical. You look at some of the city bikes that are common in Europe, and they have fenders so that you can ride in the rain without getting splattered too much. They have lights with dynamos on them that generate the power to produce the lights. The LED lights now are almost good enough that you can get by without them, but they're also easily stolen. So you not only need a bike, but you need an excellent bike lock, because a good bike is going to become very valuable, and great efforts will be made to steal it. You know, taking your bike into a downtown situation and multiply that times 2 or 10, and you've got a pretty good idea about the odds that you'll be facing. Taking a bike, you'll want to basically keep the bike with you at all costs until you can get back home. In general, locks, chains, we need to be able to lock up every single shed, every single garage, every single door needs to be reinforced and strengthened. There's almost no measure of security that's too much, except some of the high-end stuff that's sort of, you know, fingerprint scanner type level stuff that might not be still usable after an EMP event. You know, the more basic and simple, probably better. Yeah.
Are there e-bikes that can withstand EMP?
Like I said, from what I can tell, and nobody really knows because the EMP is something that has not been studied at great length ever since the moratorium on nuclear weapon usage. But physics is in our favor. It's very difficult to produce the energy levels over widespread areas that produce the highest E1 spike, which is the spike that damages the electronics that are in small scale. The US military equipment is hardened against the E1 to a certain point, and the nuclear detonations produce the higher concentration of that E1 spike over a small circumference, like a bullseye, and then it sort of radiates outward with the lower levels of that radiation. Most of us here are going to experience the lower level E1 spike. But what follows afterwards is the E3 spike, which is this massive storm that's slow moving, but it produces this huge surge that propagates through all the power. So anything that's connected up to any long wire, which means any outlet, is going to get hit with a big surge of power. Your whole house is going to get hit with a big surge of power. Now, I write about these topics a lot in the World Affairs Brief. There's a product out there called I'm tired today, I'm not getting my words out. Anyway,
EMP shield.
no, sorry, I'm kinda down on the EMP shield. The EMP shield is very well marketed. It probably will do a fair amount of stuff. It costs about $800, I think, for the house version of it. There is a Siemens FS150 bolt shield, the Siemens bolt shield, and it costs about $350. Bolt, like lightning bolt shield. And it costs, about half of what the EMP shield costs. And as far as we can tell, it is as robust, if not more robust, than the EMP shield. Kind of mad about the EMP shield. There was a good physicist who sort of took theirs apart and criticized him, and they sued him over it and silenced him and squashed him, rather than being like, oh yeah, well thanks, we'll fix it and make it better. Right? And as far as I can tell, they haven't ever really done the right thing with that regard. So, but they have a product out there that you can attach to your car that's supposed to help it out. And anyway, we can talk about EMP all day long. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors involved too.
How do you spell Siemens Bolt?
SIE, MENS. And everyone should put one of those on their house. It's fairly easy to wire it up right at the electrical panel, and it basically stops the big surge that comes on the grid wire from propagating throughout your house. You still have the problem of the wires that are inside your house picking up a certain amount of EMP. So there's also individual surge protectors by the brand Zero Surge. They are some of the best. And they cost, a couple $100, but you can plug your laptops, your computers, all of your critical equipment into these, and they have a very fast clamping time where they will stop it even for the E1 component to save your computers. Hopefully, we don't ever really know. So keep your drive backup to a small backup drive. I try to do that every Friday. I try to do that regularly. And ideally you would have 2 of them and you rotate between them. And ideally you would keep the second one in a second location that's not your house. When I lived in Las Vegas, my house got broken into and they stole all my laptops and all my backup drives, because I kept my backup drives next to the laptops, right? Back it up. And so then I lost both of them. Whereas if I had rotated through with someone else's house or maybe even just some other hiding place, then I would at least have my data from 2 weeks old or so, and that would sell a lot. Yes, Jane?
The one house protector thing, was it a volt with a V as in Victor, or a bolt with a boy?
Bolt with a B, like
With
a
a
lightning
B.
bolt with
Bolt.
a B. B as in
Boy.
boy, yes.
Okay.
Bolt shield.
So the trash can EMP Faraday cage?
Great, Faraday cages, absolutely fabulous. If or when each of you get
But
a.
the thing is, you
Yes.
have to know it's coming to put it in the garbage can.
Yeah.
If you have the Zero
Yes.
Surge on it, then if it comes and you're unaware, which is probably the case,
Yes,
then your laptops and everything are
Right.
protected with the Zero Surge.
sure.
You just put them in there when you're not using them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, most of us will end up having to have backups. So your backup drive, one of them goes into the metal trash can, and then you rotate it out. And when you upgrade to a new computer, you put your old one in the trash can, and then you at least have that
And
second
nobody
level.
ever looks in your trash can, cause that's a weird place to look for a computer. There you go. Brilliant.
I do think that e-bikes could be valuable. E-bikes, if they were plugged in, would be susceptible to EMP. I'm still sort of out there on the whole e-bike practicality thing. Part of me is thinking that it's a very high-tech kind of item, and that something could easily go wrong with something, and then you'd be left with all that extra weight to lug around while you're still using it for the bike part of it. So my inclination is to maybe, if I did buy the e-bike, I'd still keep my old bike.
Yeah.
I'd probably still put the bike racks on the old bike. I'd still get a basket for the old bike. I would still get all the spare tires for the old bike. and you cannot have enough spare tires for the old bike. It is incredible how fast and easy it is to get punctures.
If you look at an e-bike, there's enough stuff going into those hubs that it would be, I was just talking to a guy where we were staying in Yuma,
Oh.
that had two beautiful e-bikes out in front of his campsite. And he said, oh, I've got all this, I've got a bunch of spares, but there's no way I can change it myself, cause look at that.
Right.
And I said, well, at least you got the spares, you know, that's the first step, but, yeah. It's not as easy as just changing a bicycle tire.
Right. I think, so America has the highest percentage of people with bikes. It's actually not Japan or Europe, they just happen to use their bikes more. We have more bikes sitting in our garages as Americans than we have practical bikes. Yes, thank you, Jason. Okay, I am running out of time here, let's move through this. I'm still at the outside perimeter right now. Okay, at the house, you want to try to stop people trying to make it into the house. So motion sensing cameras would be great. Something that pops up and pops up on a TV screen inside your house that says, hey, we notice some activity here. And that would be very helpful. You can have door and window alarms. You don't have to have a full alarm system. You can just buy the door and window alarms off of Amazon, eBay, where if the window gets pulled open, it separates the two parts of the alarm and one side starts blaring. That can help. You can get pets inside your house. The dogs don't have to be on the outside of the perimeter. They can also alert you to someone trying to break in on the inside. Communications I've added. This is important because once you get the alert, what's going to be your first step? The first step is to call for help. The first step is to, if you can, if you have time. So the idea is that all of these systems will give you time to respond. And if you have enough time, your first response is to try to get some help over there. If there are police around, let's get them coming. If there's not, get the locals around you who is your support group to say, hey, I'm the one being attacked right now, let's all rally around here, right? That can be inside the house. The old intercom systems could still be an excellent option. You can talk to other people in the other rooms without necessarily confronting someone who might be inside the house. You can get on your ham radio. You can get on your FRS radio if there are people close by. And there's also the option for CB radios. Ultimately, though, you're going to come down to the active responders. You, the homeowner, is going to be the point person to respond. Whoever is still at home is going to be the one who is most importantly in that position to respond. Now you will want to ideally have trusted neighbors, friends, and families to call on. And you don't have to hunker down in the house to provide a suitable defense. In some cases, it is most valuable to get out of the house. And it is sometimes best to get, if there is a home intrusion situation, is to get someone out who can go for help. If for some reason the phone lines are cut, or you don't have a cell phone, or you left your cell phone charging up where the intruders are, you want to keep your cell phone in your bedroom. You want to have a good lock on your bedroom door. You want to have those barriers in place so that it takes them longer to get to you, and you can mount an effective response. Yes?
You haven't mentioned night vision.
Yes, I haven't.
It's one thing to have an alarm system that goes off and then you're blind because you're at night.
Yes.
And you can't see whether it's a possum or a person.
Yes.
I think a good setup of night vision is really important so that you know that it's not a neighbor that you may decide you gotta shoot at them.
Sure,
you need to know who you're shooting at.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend night vision.
Yes.
And there's a lot of good low-cost night vision available.
Yeah, the cost of night vision equipment has come down. there's different technologies available with that. Anything is better than nothing. Most of them involve some kind of infrared light that is flashed out there that the intruders can't see. It's not part of our spectrum, but we have a sensor that can pick that up, and then it looks like you are shining a flashlight around, and it can often pick up regular levels of infrared light. Most of the night vision security cameras are actually infrared based, and they do a pretty decent job. Now, it's not quite enough to pick up nuanced profiles of like faces until they get up close to the camera, but anything is better than nothing. And even just being able to get some kind of visual on whether it's a two-legged person or a deer or a stray dog can help you respond quickly to some of these warnings that pop up at night. And that brings me to another thing that I didn't mention, which is outside security lights, motion sensor lights. These are motion activated lights, are very valuable. I would recommend motion activated lights that are very bright, that are at the corners of the house, so that things that are trying to traverse around to the back of your house automatically trip one or two of these lights. If you have parking areas or dark alleyways or dark sides to your house, or areas where there's sort of a staircase that goes down to a basement door or something, you would want those lit up with motion activated lights. Any sort of outbuilding or equipment shed, or where you normally park your bikes or your e-bike, you would want to have those to light up. You also want switch activated lights. Sometimes those can be the same lights. Some technology allows that. You want to be able to turn a light switch on from inside the house if you hear a noise, or you want to figure out what's going on, whether there's a possum digging in your garbage can or whether there's an intruder out there. You want to be able to flick on a bank of lights that lights up that whole side of the house, where you can then from inside the house have a good clear view with lots of light outside while your window is dark. So they can't see well inside your house, but you can see brightly lit all outside of your house. So having a switch on next to certain windows that are good visual windows for the whole side of your house, having a switch there that turns on a big light blank, the intruders will now be facing bright lights while you have darkness, and you can see what's going on better. Obviously, if the EMP hits and everyone else is out of power and you turn on big bright lights, you are attracting attention to yourself. But once you're under attack, that threat is already there, and it's appropriate to give yourself the upper edge as best you can. But thanks for that. Night vision is great. The best night vision, the military grade, is still thousands of dollars. But there are plenty of infrared base that will still give you a better edge. Now, other people that have the infrared edge, they can see your light, and they can see you flashing it and moving it around. But at that point, you're still one step up above, the rabble. So hopefully it's still better than nothing. Which brings me to flashlights. So our personal self-defense kit. You hear something at night, you don't have the option of necessarily turning on lights that only illuminate your intruder once they're inside the house. All of our lights are built so that we turn on a light and it gives light to where we are at. What you don't necessarily want to do is illuminate yourself. Lights attract bullets is the phrase that they say. There's so much topic to consider. I mean, the world of preparedness is so vast. We can go down so many rabbit holes with these things. And I write about them constantly, so sign up for the World Affairs Brief, and you'll see a lot of these topics covered. And if you do sign up for the World Affairs Brief, you can go into the archives. You can search for any topic you want. And I've talked about night vision, and I've talked about bicycles, and I've talked about EMP in multiple cases, and I've talked about flashlights and weapon-mounted lights, and about different kinds of weapons for home defense. And we could all get into that more, but we're past time now, so I'm not going to be offended if anybody leaves. But I'll try to just run through these topics here quickly. In my preparedness tip about weapon-mounted lights, I said, this leads to an interesting controversy. Which is better in self-defense, a handheld flashlight or a weapon-mounted light? A handheld light allows for safer searching because you aren't pointing your gun at everything that you point your flashlight at. A handheld light, safer searching, more powerful flashlight options, and the ability to hold it away from your body to partially conceal your position. But if you have to fire a gun, it is much better to be holding it with both hands, which means that the light must be on the gun. No matter how you hold your flashlight in your other hand, whether bracing your handgun with your wrist like police officers used to be trained to do, or holding it between your fingers, or holding it up by your head, it can still affect your accuracy and certainly makes changing magazines difficult. So here's what I recommend. Keep a good handheld flashlight near your defensive firearm and mount a light on your weapon. Use the flashlight in all situations up until you feel the need to draw your weapon. At that point, change to the weapon and its light, which should allow you to keep both hands on the gun. A good tactical belt, by the way, can help you grab everything you need at once and put it on quickly and stay organized, including when swapping between flashlights, guns, spare magazine, first aid kit, cell phone, etc. in an organized way.
I've heard there are night vision scopes. I've just heard that.
Oh, that mount to a weapon.
Infrared.
Infrared, sure. Makes sense. Okay. There, I was prepared to go through a breakdown of handgun versus shotgun versus carbine. Here's the Cliff Notes version of it. Everybody needs to start out with a handgun. It's the most versatile weapon. It's the most concealable weapon. It is the most valuable weapon that will guide you in more situations in hard times than any other weapon. The second weapon you should get is some kind of a rifle. The Westerns is still true. You know, a good straight shooting rifle is easier to handle, it's easier to manipulate, it is more accurate, you can get more firepower, and it is best for longer distance shooting. The reason that the AR-15 is so popular is not because it's made for assaulting things, but because it is lightweight, it is easy for people to hold. Even a small person can put a lot of firepower down range quickly, very accurately with an AR-15 type platform. You don't have to go with that platform. It does look pretty military-like. The shotgun is very valuable for home defense, but recognize that it is a big weapon. I like a shotgun. I think I would grab my shotgun in a home defense situation. Racking the slide, would hopefully drive people off just by the sound of that, but it doesn't really always do that. The downside to it is that it kicks a lot. Even law enforcement hate to go to the range a lot with their shotgun because it just beats them up a bit. It is also very loud, and when you shoot that in closed spaces, it is loud. So have ear protection. There's good hearing protection. There's active hearing protection where you can still hear, and you have to have active hearing protection because when you're tiptoeing around the house looking for the intruder, they're going to be making as little noise as possible too, and you have to be able to have good hearing and keep those senses alive, but you don't want to blow your eardrums out with your shotgun.
When you're in the home and you have a shotgun,
Yes.
you don't have to be quite so concerned who's in the room behind the wall.
That's right. The pellets stop.
You're
If you use birdshot.
Yeah, if you're using that, you'll be able to hit the intruder without hitting somebody in the room.
And you don't have to be as accurate.
Yeah.
If you're slightly off, you're still going to probably hit them with a couple of the shot. There are lots of advantages to a scattergun. It would not be my first choice for my wife or some of my older kids to try to wield that.
You get a 410.
Oh, really? Well, yeah. So there are some options. Now, the most important weapon is the one that you have in your hands when you have to face an intruder, right? And any weapon will do if you are good enough to use it, right?
First rule of gunfighting, right?
Yes.
Bring it in.
What did you say?
The first rule of gunfighting is bring your gun, right? Well, it's really true. Many people have all of the things for a concealed weapon, but they don't carry it because it's not comfortable. And if you're in a situation where you need your weapon, but you don't have your weapon because you left it at home, it's not going to help you much. I have been surprised by the carbines, the small 9mm rifles that don't have a long, mast to them. They are surprisingly easy for people who don't have a lot of strength to handle them and to be quite accurate with them. So that's something else to consider. Okay, a quick note, body armor. There's lots of body armor out there. If you do have enough time to be able to put something on, that can give you a big advantage. There are several lightweight Kevlar options. There's some Kevlar options now that wrap around to give you more protection instead of just the typical vitals barriers, and those would be good to store next to your bedside so that you can throw those on. If you do have to go out and investigate some kind of clatter in there that's beyond suspicious, not just the typical thing that you're just being extra careful of, but something that does sound scary, it's awfully nice to have something to put on that gives you a little bit more protection. But no body armor is perfect.
Do you have a place to recommend to look for that? Because I was on Amazon and don't really see anything on there.
I didn't put one down in the notes.
Palmetto?
Palmetto's not too bad. There's a better brand called DXW. That has a higher protection factor to it that I was impressed about.
Repeat that?
I think there's a brand called DXW, like Delta X-Ray Whiskey. D.
Is that the wraparound kind?
I think I don't know. See, it's about time for me to do a new prep tip on this because I found the wraparound kind and it was very expensive, but I thought it was probably worth recommending just because it was so lightweight, but it gave you the same protection as the plates do that are 9 pounds each. And so you could get something that you could actually wear without, wearing you out.
Do they make any pajamas out of this stuff?
Right. Yes.
Provo Police instruct people that almost none of the people breaking into your home are actually armed. And the last thing they want is an armed confrontation. So if you say, I'm armed and I will shoot you, they're gone. Just like that. They don't want, they want the quick burglary hit in and out in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And they do not want, they don't come armed to fight you because they're hoping you're not there. If you're there and you tell them you have a weapon, they're out the door, out the window.
I think that's probably true in our current
Right,
state.
it is now.
Right,
That's right.
as it
You're
is
talking
right
about
now.
something more desperate, yeah.
Knowing what I know about when my house was broken into in Las Vegas, I think that was the case. But oftentimes they travel in groups. So most burglaries in America now are done by someone in your neighborhood, someone who is looking for cash for drugs or is looking for medicines, prescription
and if
drugs.
they get one person in this prayer, they call their friends to come in.
Oftentimes they are working in packs and they go faster by getting one person in, making sure that no one's there and everyone else sweeps in and takes what they can. I don't expect that to be the situation in hard times, which I think is more what we have to prepare for, which I fully expect with the number of handguns around and the people who don't know how to use them, is that the roving gangs will quickly become armed, and that a projection of force will be very important.
Especially if they need food.
If they're desperate enough for food, then they're
And
probably
no one
willing
come
to do what it takes to get what you have. There's last time I gave this presentation, I got into a long discussion about the principles of self-defense and where you land with the law after you shoot someone, and we don't have to get into that today, but I do have 2 references for you on the paper. One is Masad Ayub, who's excellent at explaining things. He has a book called Deadly Force, And then this book, Andrew F. Bronca, who's an attorney, goes through, this one's a little bit drier. He really digs into the details about what to expect in lawsuits that could come after you shoot someone in your house. The biggest takeaway from this book for me is not that you want to think so hard about this, that you're in a deadly situation and you're afraid to pull the trigger because you're like, now wait, does he have the opportunity, and do I have the jeopardy on my, and am I still innocent and you will know when your life is threatened and you need to take assertive action. Now, if he's running away, then you just make sure that he's not just running for cover and is going to turn around and shoot you, or isn't just running away to join his group and then turn around and come back at you, right? But it's best not to shoot fleeing people. It is very important to call out and say, even if it's just help police, if they keep coming at you when you've shouted for police or stay back, I'm armed and I will defend myself, shows that they are assertive and that they are willing and able to come after you, and that you have a right to be scared of them and to fear for your life, which is the most important criteria to remember in the situations where you have to defend yourself, is afterwards to recognize what was it that made me fearful, and to be able to articulate that, because that is the most important part of your self-defense. And when you do have to call 911, then it is important to tell them, there was an intruder in my house, he's been shot, send the police and an ambulance, right? And if he survives, I want to press charges. That shows that I recognize that I'm the victim here, and I want not just the police, but I also want the ambulance. That shows that you care about this guy who's trying to shoot you or come after you, or do whatever they were going to do. That wasn't just running as soon as they found out that there wasn't an unoccupied house, which meant that they had more in mind than just taking whatever they could find. And those are very important to establish, and there's some very difficult situations to think through. But most of the time, when you have set up perimeter defenses that are difficult to penetrate, it gives you much greater standing to say, he really was trying hard to come after me because he breached this, he breached this, he breached this, and he was in my house. I shot him.
Yeah.
Now, yes, go ahead.
I remember some years ago, I actually read the statute in Utah,
Yes.
Utah law, and I don't remember the statute now, but I was pleased to see it said something to the effect that if a homeowner shoots an intruder in their home, it is presumed that the homeowner did the right thing.
Right, that
And
makes sense.
so that was good to see.
Yes.
And I can imagine other states where they say,
Right.
Yeah.
I think most of the cautionary tales about don't say anything to the police, don't do anything, don't admit anything, is mostly because of these other states. And it really does come down to the prosecutors indicting you, right? And most prosecutors in Utah are not going to indict the homeowner who is defending his castle and all of that. But yes, go ahead.
I had a very good police buddy that
Yes.
gave me the advice that if a guy's trying to beat down your door, go ahead and shoot him, and after you shoot him, drag him in your house. He was serious about it. Drag him in your house because you're in good shape then.
Right.
I remember in Salt Lake, there had been somebody trying to break in somebody's sliding glass door,
Oh, yes.
and they shot them through the door. They were still outside, and there was no prosecution.
Right, that does make sense. There is a lot about, does he have the ability, the opportunity, and did you feel in jeopardy? And those three things are crucial. But yes.
When society breaks down, I don't think we have to worry
Understand.
about it.
That's right. At that point, it's going to be a little bit more of dog eat dog, and we're just going to have to stay surviving in those difficult situations. And that's a very good point. We don't have to worry about the courts coming after us so much, because unfortunately we will have lost a lot of the rule of law at that point. Yes?
So, Manti Prep Group on April 8th, if you want to put it on your calendar. Sergeant
Jensen.
Keith Jensen is coming to talk about castle law and stand around laws.
And next
So, you
Wednesday
wanna-
night, TPR is having Keith Jensen come, Sergeant Keith Jensen come, so two opportunities. At the Yardley Inn.
That's a potluck and
Next
that's,
Wednesday,
yeah.
TPR.
Great.
So, there you go.
I don't
Yes,
think
Kim?
people here know what TDR is.
Oh,
The People
TPR.
Restored. Come check it out.
Years ago, my siblings and I were sitting in my sister's house, talking about all the things we could do to protect our families. I have a brother-in-law that was in Iraq and in Vietnam, and he was real quiet, and he was sitting off to a side, and after we had waxed eloquent about what we could do and stuff, he said, and there was a lull in the conversation, if you ever have to kill someone for whatever reason, it will change your life forever. Now, I'm not saying that to say never shoot, but be careful about your justification for it.
When that was played out in Homestead, that was pretty dramatic. What did you think of Homestead?
We'll talk about that later. There's a lot of problems with
Off
Homestead.
camera.
Okay, go ahead.
What about the undone? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so there are non-lethal methods too.
Every time I tell a guy, he'll say, he'll come back and shoot and kill you because you hurt him so bad.
Right.
You gotta just kill him. But
He'll
what
sue
do you
you.
think? I don't wanna kill
You're talking
him.
about the tear gas type
Oh,
pods?
no, it,
Non-lethal.
Is it
Stun
stun
gun?
gun?
Probably assault, other things.
you know, it just makes them.
Stun gun? Is that
No,
what you
it's not a stun, it's called an undone. It's orange. Yes, it's orange, it's advertised all the time on the site. It makes their,
Burn along
it's their ears, makes their ears, makes them.
So there are several non-lethal methods out there.
Yeah.
I don't recommend spending a lot of time with the non-lethal methods. The firearms is a tool that needs to be part of every person's preparedness kit. It is a tool. It is valuable for more than just killing someone. It can do a lot to defend your property. There's a lot of varmint, there's a lot of hunting, there's a lot of reasons to have a firearm.
But you gotta know how to use it.
You definitely want to train with it, you definitely want to practice with it. But the first step is to have the firearm. We've had waves of firearm laws target the United States. Americans, even liberal America, has recognized the value of the Second Amendment, and that is why even Democratic senators and congressmen are scared of pushing anti-Second Amendment legislation. But that will not always be the case. And a firearm that you have now is much harder to take away than the firearm that you want to buy someday when they stop you from being able to get them easily. So it is very important to have a firearm. Most of the non-lethal weapons have serious drawbacks in terms of missing, not having multiple options to reload, to fire them again quickly, to make the most of the situation. Most of them are sort of those feel-good things that most people don't practice with. If you do get something like a stun gun, you'll have to find a way to practice with it. But nothing is as practical and easy to practice with and to get experience with and is as effective as a firearm, I'm sorry to say. And it is absolutely true that killing things is not something to be taken lightly, but it is.
If it's your life or their life, you gotta protect yourself.
It is not just your life too. Most often, the person that is holding the handgun is the doorway that's stopping a whole slew of crimes, especially if you have family members, younger kids. You are the one that has to stop that. The judicial system is very good at protecting rights and at not putting people to death in our society. It takes years and millions of dollars of legal efforts. The laws in our free country are front-loaded to allow us, the victims, to be able to do all of that in the moment. If we can just have the edge to put that person where he belongs. If not, they go on to have multiple victims, and we are seeing lots of victims happen from most of those. We are not at a higher virtuous space by refusing to arm ourselves, because there are many people who are bad people, who are evil people, who are quick to pick up that weapon and use it to their advantage. And all of us here need to be able to push back on that. And I'll tell you, even the smallest gun is still the greatest equalizer. You know, even people with body armor, people with good experience are scared of anyone who has even a .22 in their hand, because that little bit of lead, we are still soft and we still bleed. Yeah, sorry.
There really is a psychological trauma that you have to face when you think about killing someone. But I can tell you, being a Vietnam vet, that you need to face that psychological trauma and deal with it before the fact, because you won't have time in the moment. If it's worth, I mean, it is going to change your life, I agree, but your life will still be yours.
Right. And there's psychological trauma.
Yeah, and the worse that our society gets, the more we should be cognizant of that psychological barrier that might stop us from doing what we need to do in the moment.
Right. I think that's a good point. Okay, this is always a difficult conversation, and every time this comes up, I have trouble feeling like I've won and satisfied the crowd. So I would just leave with the recommendation that everyone make the effort to be able to push back against the voluminous evil that is out there and that is laying low because it's pacified right now, but will rear its ugly head in many and multifarious ways in hard times. And I don't mean to scare us, except enough to scare us into being prepared and to getting our game a little bit better together, and then trust in the Lord, who ultimately is the one that will be on our side if we are on the right side, and being careful to do the right thing. And I think most of the psychological trauma can often come from people who were pushed into a situation where they were firing on people that they weren't sure were really out to kill them. And that can be very heavy and taxing. And I know that many of the veterans struggle with that because of the way that wars are fought. And it's easy for leaders to push the lowest man down to do what they want done. It's not always the right thing in every situation for them, and that can be very hard to deal with. But when you are facing someone that you know is meaning you or your family great bodily harm and injury, there is a good sense of righteousness in the Nephi-Laban sort of sense of the word, that the Lord can put that person into your hands, and David can take down Goliath, and you can come out on top. And these evil people don't have to ride roughshod over our communities someday, and we can be part of a greater sense of law and order by being prepared and being knowledgeable about the situation, so that we can stay calm and be able to adjudicate between the poor refugees and the people that are actually aggressors. That concludes the remarks that I wanted to cover on active home defense. There's a great many other pieces of this, and I encourage you all to dig deeper into them and to get better get your house into a better stage as well. And I thank you for your time.